Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome the President of Montenegro, Jakov Milatović. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm happy to say that at this place, Diplomatic Academy, we are used to politicians from the Western Balkans. They come here regularly, and it's a pleasure that you are here for the first time, and I understand also for the first time on an official state visit to the Republic of Austria. Mr. Milatović has been a guest, or maybe a student, one might say, in Vienna for half a year at the WU Wien, at the University of Economics and Business. And he's an economist by education, educated, as I know, in Podgorica, and then being educated around the globe, more or less.
That's true.
I read in your biography from Stanford to Beijing, but also longer periods in the UK, in Oxford, always in the economy. And President Milatović then became a senior expert on the development of the eastern and southeastern part of Europe. He worked for the European Bank for Development Reconstruction in Bucharest, giving advice on the development of countries like Montenegro, but also the Eastern European countries. And I guess at that time you understood that it needs some sort of political work, and you co-founded a pro-European party, Europe Now in English, Europa Jetzt. And this party won the last elections, one could say, both the presidential elections, when you were elected in a very surprising big majority in the runoff of almost 60% of the vote. But also the parliamentary election, your party became the largest party, and it succeeded to form a government, a minority government, but still a government, which is a very pro-European one. And President Milatović, since that time, has proven in his contacts with the European Commission, the presidents, traveling through Europe, what it means to work permanently towards the integration of a country like Montenegro. And I'm pleased to say President Milatović offered to give an introduction on how he sees the role of the integration of Montenegro also for Europe, for European security and stability, and then he's very willing to answer questions from the floor and from the audience, and I will allow myself also to ask one or two questions about the possible stumbling blocks on the way to integration. But first of all, the floor is yours, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much. This was a very, what can I say, nice introduction. This is sort of for me like coming back to home, as I lived in Vienna for a while when I was a student back in 2008, 2009. It was a long time ago, but indeed it's always nice to be back to Vienna, and this is actually the first official visit of the President of Montenegro to the Republic of Austria ever since we got independent in 2006, and perhaps a very nice part of the visit would be attendance of the Opera Ball tomorrow night. So this is what I'm very much looking forward, the invitation of the President to come and see the ball. Last time I remember going to opera, I went to see the ballet. I think it was Raimonda. And it's going to be a nice coming back to the opera as well. But anyhow, it is very pleasant to be here at the Diplomatic Academy, and I do want to thank you for the invitation. And I do want also to greet you all and to hope to have a very open and frank discussion about the things. As as the ambassador rightly said, I'm a trained economist, and I came back to Montenegro in 2020 following the parliamentary elections when the country got the new government, and I joined that government as an economy minister following a number of years where I worked as an economist for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Back then, together with the finance minister, we were sort of recognized as the two young professionals who came back from abroad to Montenegro to sort of support structural reforms, particularly in the domain of economic policy, and really to bring the country closer to the EU and to speed up the convergence, which ultimately really matters for the quality of life of the people. So I was an economy minister for about 1.5 years, and following that, that government, was voted a no confidence vote in the parliament. Together with my colleague, the finance minister, we created what is now known as the Europe Now political party. So we actually won 3 elections over the last 1 year. So I think that the first really crucial election was the local elections, where I was running as a candidate to become the mayor of the capital city. That's something that we also won. Unfortunately, I never became the mayor of the capital city, as there was another election that I needed to enter the race. So I entered the race for the president of the country, which I won. And I think that indeed April of 2023 was a very unique date in democratic development, as that was the time when the transition of power in Montenegro, which started back in 2020 following the parliamentary elections, came to a completion. Before going to the topic of the EU accession, I think for the audience, it's also important to understand certain aspects and certain developments that the country is experiencing over the last few years. We are a small but very proud nation in the middle of the Balkans, Southeastern Europe, with the long and proud history. And actually, I think that our diplomatic relations with Austria stem from 1879, 1 year after the Berlin Congress, when Montenegro became one of the few European countries to be internationally recognized, back then as a Kingdom of Montenegro. And over the last 150 years of our history, following the international recognition, the country was basically ruled by 4 regimes. Following the Berlin Congress all the way until the World War I, it was the royal family of Montenegro, the royal family Petrović-Njegoš. Actually, the last king of Montenegro, King Nikola, was famous for being able to marry a number of his daughters to important European courts. So this is why back then one of the princesses became the Queen of Italy. Another one became the mother of the future king of Yugoslavia. A few others were married, in German courts. Some in the Russian court, etc., etc. And I think the King Nikola was indeed a very successful in diplomacy. I think he would probably be a much better speaker than I am at this Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. But going back to the modern days, following the royal family Petrović-Njegoš, Montenegro, between the 2 world wars, was ruled by the royal family of Serbia, the royal family Karađorđević, which became the royal family of Yugoslavia. Then, following the World War II, Montenegro as a federal state of Yugoslavia was ruled by the communist regime all the way until the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then when the Berlin Wall came to a fall, the multi-party system also came to a place in Montenegro. But for the last 30 years, so all the way until 2020, the country was ruled by a party which was stemming from the former Communist Party of Yugoslavia. So over the 150 years of our history, the country was basically ruled by 4 regimes. And when you really zoom out a bit and when you analytically try to understand the things, one thing all those 4 regimes had in common. So regardless some positive and some negative things that naturally all of them did, they were all autocratic in essence of their governance. So for the first time that this small and proud country changed its government following the democratic elections was indeed in 2020. And just to present the pace of reforms and the pace of democratic maturity that we currently have in the country is the fact that we have achieved over the last 4 years, despite the fact that we for the first time changed the government democratically following the elections in 2020, is the fact that today the elections in Montenegro are not anymore the question of life and death, which is not always the case, even in Europe, not to mention across the globe. And I think that's really the major fundamental achievement in terms of democratic maturity of our country. And that's the basis. I think that over the last few years, the country has also achieved a major step forward in terms of the rule of law, as another layer which comes on top of the fundamental layer, which is free and functioning elections, which are there as an exercise of the free will of the people who are electing their own representatives in the parliament and in the government. Following the change in 2020, we already now have a 3rd government in place, and I think that going back to the rule of law, what has indeed been achieved is the ability of the country, of us as a society, to perhaps clean up our judiciary from some of the people who were compromised, who were there to fight organized crime and corruption on behalf of the people of Montenegro, but who instead actually became part of organized crime and corruption. And that was something that was also written by a number of international reports, including those from the State Department, from the European Commission, where more and more over the last, particularly a few years before the change of 2020, our institutions have been flagged as the captured ones by the political parties, by the even organized crime and corruption, which was tremendously negatively affecting the trust of the people in the system and in the incentives of the system. What we have done over the last few years following the democratic change and the democratic transition of power, as I said, was the ability of the society to clean up the judiciary from some of the compromised people. And also the ability of our parliament, especially now over the last few months, to find the political consensus which required the qualified majority in the parliament. So basically, the opposition and the position to be able to find a compromise on appointing the new people with integrity to the high posts within the judiciary. And that's another major step, so the one which is related to the rule of law, where we have also been able to not fully, but for sure partly, regain the trust of the people in the institutions and in the contract that ultimately exists between the people and the institutions, the state itself. Then the third layer is the one which is connected to the foreign policy. And this is something where I believe that things have been maintained as they were. And if anything was done well over the last few years in the country was, with all its negative aspects, was the foreign policy. Particularly the foreign policy which eventually led the country into NATO. So Montenegro became a NATO member in 2017, and everything which was related to our EU accession. Unfortunately, I think that the incapacity of the former political establishment, and predominantly its inadequate political will, was the key factor behind a very long period of the country negotiating with the EU on our accession. So the country has started negotiations back in 2012, and for the last 11 years we have been negotiating and we have been front-running. You know, this is what I usually say to my colleagues from Europe. We are tired of front-running. We want to come to an end of the process. And I believe that it was not in the interest of the former political establishment to come to an end of the process. For them, the interest itself was to keep the process as long as it takes. I think that a new perspective, a new value, which currently we have in Montenegro, is the political will to come to an end of the process, which requires reforms, which requires tough reforms, especially in the rule of law, in the economic policy matters, etc., etc. And I believe, as I also said, everything related to the reforms that we have done in the rule of law, that will currently exists. So, number one foreign policy priority of Montenegro is to become a fully fledged member of the European Union. I have, campaigned very intensively that we can achieve that by 2028. And I still think that's a baseline scenario where we would be able to do what is up to us by the end of 2026 or early 2027, so that the entry the entry process of Montenegro could be ratified by the national parliaments of the current member states during 2027 or early 2028, so that Montenegro can indeed become a fully fledged member at one point in 2028, which would also coincide with the new budgetary framework of the European Union. I think, as what I have understood over the last 8 months of my intensive diplomatic activity to that aim, is that there is a strong will in Brussels, for this to happen. Especially following the Russian aggression on Ukraine, I think that there was a very strong wake-up call in Brussels, as well as in other European capitals, that the enlargement is not only a technical thing, but an issue very much important for the security of the European continent. And I believe that Europe also needs a positive story, which indeed can be the one of Montenegro. So I always say that the accession of Montenegro into the EU is a story which is even bigger than Montenegro itself. It's the story which can be this needed positive signal to the rest of the region of the Western Balkans, as well as to the eastern neighborhood of the EU, that enlargement exists, that the enlargement is alive, because it is the fact that the last country that joined the EU was Croatia already now 11 years ago, while in the meantime United Kingdom left the Union. So in many of the countries, especially in the Balkans, the perspective of the EU has been a bit lost and even now mistrusted by the general public. So I believe that with this positive case of Montenegro, this reinvigoration of the accession story could be put back in place. I already mentioned the second goal of our foreign policy, which has already been achieved, which is NATO membership. I believe that all the reforms that have been done in the country, especially over the last three and a half years, have been done with the aim to boost the credibility of our NATO membership. What was interesting to understand, currently we have historically the highest support among the general public for the country's NATO membership. And the reason behind it is the following. Generally, the public in Montenegro attached the story of NATO membership to the former regime. When those two things were delinked, when people like myself, the new prime minister, generally the new people of the current political establishment in the country, have also started promoting our membership within the NATO, this has been understood by the public. And especially now, given the new geopolitical circumstances, this has also resulted in a higher support of the public for the country's NATO membership. The third important priority of our foreign policy are the good neighborly relations, which unfortunately have been damaged, particularly with Serbia, few years ahead of the change of the government in 2020. Montenegro is trying, and this is something which is also very much close to my heart, should be following a policy of a good neighbor. I believe that sometimes we in the Balkans forget that the regional integration and the good neighborly relations are just the other side of the medal, of the coin of the EU integration. We all forget the story of how the EU idea was created as a regional story of integration between the countries that were even, at different sides of the terrible war, a few years before the concept of the Union was established. So I think that good neighborly relations is a very important part of our foreign policy agenda. And finally, Montenegro is a small, open economy, part of a globalized world. And as part of it, we are also, putting forward our candidacy for a non-permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, where we are hoping to become the member of the Security Council as of 2026. It would, come as a crown of our diplomatic activity, and it would come 20 years after we regained independence in 2006. So that's in a nutshell, related to our foreign policy. And going back to your question, all of it is related ultimately to our EU accession and to the story of a stable and prosperous Western Balkan region. I think that with Montenegro can indeed, as a smallest out of all the candidate countries, as the one which is already using euro ever since 2001, as the country which has been fully aligning its foreign security policy with the one of the EU for the last more than 10 years, as the country which doesn't really have any issues with its neighbors and is promoting a good neighborly agenda, and as a country which is economically the most advanced, in comparison to all the candidate countries, and as the country which has opened all the chapters with the EU, should and could become a new member state of the EU by 2028, and again, that would really, and my opinion is that would really move the region, the whole region, closer to certain standards that are needed for the prosperity and the stability of the entire Western Balkan region. It can be this locomotive, the motor of change and the progress which is indeed needed. I stop here, and perhaps as an introductory sort of a remark from my side, that's enough to perhaps open the floor to the questions and to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much for making the case for Montenegro such clear. One can see that this is your main objective at the moment. Communicate what Montenegro means, how it changed with 2020, and that you're far away from the state capture that you described beforehand. If I may ask one or two questions concerning the picture you painted for us. You said Montenegro is a little bit tired of being the front runner, if I understood you correctly. And I understand this because you have been a front runner now for a long time.
For 11 years.
For 11 years. And it's up also to those who talk about you as front runner to deliver to a certain extent. So how do you see the chances now? Is there really a geopolitical moment that you can see and feel when you have your contacts with homologues in the member countries, that they also see there is such a moment where one has to act geopolitically?
For sure, and I think there are two aspects of the accession. There is the technical aspect, where the country definitely needs to take in place and to adopt the EU acquis, which is important. It is also important to implement it rightly. But another aspect that I think has been forgotten for a while in Europe is a geopolitical aspect, political aspect of the accession. If you really analyze the enlargement of the EU, this is the question that I always ask philosophically, but it is something that should be asked. How many countries were really fully ready of becoming EU members at the time when they became EU members? I don't really want to go over the names, but EU accession has been, transformational, not only for the east of Europe, but also for the south. Don't forget Spain, Portugal, Greece, not to mention, obviously, central and eastern part of Europe. Perhaps, Austria was among the few who was really ready, for the EU accession. But, it's an exception. I think that the EU accession as an external anchor for reforms is something which is transformational, and to that regard, definitely helps, the new momentum that we currently have in Europe, but also the new momentum that we have in Montenegro, with new generation of politicians who are truly pro-European, not transactionally pro-European, which was the case before. I lived in 6 different European countries before even entering Montenegrin politics, and academically and professionally, I've spent most of my life in Europe, and I truly believe that culturally, historically, Montenegro belongs to the EU. It is up to us now to do our own homework, to really put the whole effort of the society to change in the way and to the standards that are required, but not because of the EU, but because of us, and because of eventually the social contract which exists in every country, and that's the social contract between the people who are part of a place and the state, which ultimately is there in order to make sure that the people live a good life. And that's how I understand also the EU accession of Montenegro. I'm also doing a lot of talking. The first time I met the President Macron, I think he was a bit more, cautious about the Montenegro's perspective than what he is after our 4 times we discussed. He last week also met the new prime minister. So I think and we are doing this. Constantly. I think that apart from talking and obviously doing the things that we need to do and explaining them to the Commission and to the EU institutions, we have more intensively also paid attention to the member states. So I think that I was probably it never really happened in the history of Montenegro that within 1 month I was received by the German president, the French president, the British king, and the Italian president. And that's the way that you really also, through the personal contacts, through the official visits, you also change the perspective that the current member states, obviously apart from UK, but UK is important for many other things, have when it comes to Montenegro.
Yeah. And now you even go to the opera ball in Vienna.
Yeah, well,
after all these presidents.
This is, hope.
How do you see the perspective of Austria? What can we do? We are friends of the Western Balkans. There was on Monday a meeting of the foreign ministers of the Friends of the Western Balkans in Rome, which obviously was a very friendly meeting, and there is a lot that possibly Austria can do in contacts in Brussels and with other member states. But is there more that we could do to help Montenegro on its way?
This is what I'm also going to ask, tomorrow when I see both the president and the prime minister and the foreign minister. I think that Austria can be more vocal at the council meetings about lobbying for exactly what I have already said. The need, the best way that Austria can also support the rest of the region, which would indeed have then a higher impact, would be to push and support Montenegro's accession, because think of when Montenegro enters, how that event would be really also a game changer for the rest of the region, because then other countries would also sort of ask the question, what is there that they need to do in order to be accepted? It would really send a massive signal that reforms pay off, that perhaps a new culture of a new political culture pays off. I think that Austria is among the countries in Europe that know the region the best. Not because the fact that historically it had a big presence in the region. That Vienna has been for a long time seen as the place of where basically intellectual guidance was coming from on the rest of the region. I think that Austria has a massive economic interest in the region as well. So the stability and the prosperity of the Balkan region is in the national interest of Austria, and I think that Austria understands that quite well. Austria for sure can clearly on the European map show every country of the Western Balkan, which is not always the case in rest of Europe, but I think that indeed a bit more lobbying from I'm looking at the Austrian ambassador here, a bit more lobbying, and I think that it's even sometimes up to us to ask for it, and I'm sure it will come as a result of it. We are very much grateful for Austria, together with Italy and the other countries leading this support, organizing the Friends of the Western Balkans group in the EU. We very much appreciate that, and I think keep up the good work and intensify it in the same way as we at home intensify our own reforms.
I do understand this was a sort of very, very polite admonishment that we should do more than we do at the moment. Austria is pushing in its foreign policy the idea also of gradual integration parts. Do you see this as a good way forward to try to find areas in the internal market where you could already participate?
Yeah, I think it's that's basically a very good method in order to intensify certain things. I think that we have already been put in the loop and be presented at different meetings that are only EU related. I think that's the benefit of the gradual integration. In a sense, the concept of the gradual integration has been also taken into the account in terms of presenting the new growth plan for the Western Balkans, recently presented by the Commission, where the plan consists of 4 pillars. One is sort of a bigger access of the candidate countries to the single market. The other part of it is regional economic integration of the countries of the Western Balkans. The third is obviously about reforms that we also need to intensify. And the fourth is the intensity of the financial support that the countries get from the EU. I think the needs are big, particularly the needs in infrastructure. But ultimately, when you really think about it, it's everything that all the funds that go to the infrastructure, which is in the Balkans, is also supporting Austrian companies and generally, the economic activity within the current member states of the EU. So I think that all of it makes also a very much rational sense from the part of the current member states. And I think that Austria recognizes that very much. I have recently read a survey of how successful, for instance, Austrian Airlines was in getting the air traffic from the countries of former Yugoslavia. So most of the transit now goes over Vienna. I think that over the last 10 years, I have landed and departed from this airport 500 times. I'm now being a bit dramatic, but it really tells you that Austrian companies have indeed recognize this. Not to mention the importance of the Austrian banks in the banking sector of Montenegro, as well as the other countries of the Western Balkans, the insurance companies, the companies from the logistics sector. So, you know, I think that businesses sometimes understand in advance, you know, something that perhaps politicians understand a bit with the delay. And I'm here, you know, to perhaps make a good story that the politicians also understand that. Although I think that you know, that has already been understood.
I think it has been understood, but Montenegro is a good business case for sure. It should also be a good political case now in the European Union, if possible. My last personal question would be NATO. You said that this was one of the few things that Mr. Djukanovic or whoever ruled before 2020 did well. For making it possible, but that it was always related to other issues, and now it's much more popular in your country. You may know that in Austria we don't have a discussion about security at all, but we are not in such a different geographical position than your country. Can you explain why there is this difference? Why your majority of your population said yes to NATO, the political parties said yes to NATO, you're fully integrated, you're participating also with the military in these activities, you're aligned to the foreign and security policy and defense policy of the European Union. Why is there such a difference? Is it simply because the Balkans are different from the situation of Austria, or is there any special reason you see why a country like Austria acts so differently in security issues from a country like Montenegro?
Well, I think that you know, things for sure change, right? You know, Europe that we all knew before the World War II was one story. Europe after the World War II was another one. You know, Europe following the fall of the Berlin Wall was, you know, again, you know, a different story. Even Europe now is another story. So I think that you know, things change. What I believe NATO brought to Montenegro is the sense of stability and security.
It's the same with neutrality in Austria. Majority says it brought to us a sense of stability and security.
Well, I think, you know, that's that indeed can be a valid point for Austria. I'm not really you know, here to judge the opinion of the people in Austria. What I can tell you is the following: that Yugoslavia, as opposed to Austria, has suffered a terrible decade of wars, which lasted from 1991 all the way until 1990. And you know, it was a decade which basically a relatively prosperous state moved back in the past for years. I think, you know, that's something that hopefully will never happen again. And now you have Slovenia, which joined NATO from the former Yugoslav countries. You have Croatia. You have Montenegro. You have North Macedonia. And of course, you know, Albania is part of the region, although it was not part of the former Yugoslavia. And I think it all did, you know, increase the stability of the region. What I have also, as a president who now, you know, is a member of the Security Council, which is constitutionally the body which is in charge of our army, and makes all the decisions that are related to defense policy and generally related to army. I think that inclusion in NATO also improved the standards of our army, the generally the status of our army, and have indeed sort of improved the things in comparison to how it used to be the case, especially the case during the former 20 years. So for us, it played well.
And it helped you also in identity building, national identity building, I guess.
Well, I think it's really ultimately a matter of belonging to a club of ultimately democratic countries, which have decided to join forces in order to have a common security and defense policy. And I think especially now, given the geopolitical challenges for Montenegro, that was a very important thing. I think that overall, the Montenegro's membership in NATO has also improved the stability of the entire region, and I think that has been recognized well. What I have seen and what I have told you as a story of Montenegro is that we have seen the rise of the public support for our membership. It is still below the public support of our EU membership, which is usually the case in generally in Europe. But as long as the NATO serves its mission, I think that it is good that Montenegro is part of it.
You mentioned the geopolitical challenge, and you didn't mention Russia. But Russia played and plays a role with migrants in Montenegro, with even property by Russians in Montenegro. I remember when I went to your capital city, that there is a presence from Russia quite in the city center, a Pushkin monument given by the Russian government some years ago. So what is the Russian influence there, and how do you react to that? Now we are talking about certainly the negative cyber influences coming from Russia. How do you see the situation?
Well, I think Russia is a big European country that has made a great impact throughout the European history. I think that what we have seen over the last few years following the Russian aggression on Ukraine was perhaps also something negative in the sense of making equality between generally Russian art, literature, its contribution to the European civilization, the same as the current regime in Kremlin. I think that's absolutely unacceptable. The Russian writers are an important part of the schooling system in Montenegro. I think it's the Russian composers as well, and I think that's the same as in Austria or as in many other European places. So just to explain the Pushkin monument in Podgorica, I think that we also have some other examples of great Russian people being represented through monuments in Montenegro, and I would definitely make a clear difference between that part of story and the current regime in Russia, which has unprovokedly made an aggression on another independent country. And to me, it's as easy as that. I think that throughout the history of Montenegro, throughout the history of many of the Western Balkan countries, Russia has played an important role in terms of our fight for freedom, especially against the Ottoman Empire. And I think that's very well remembered by the history of Montenegro, as well as the people of Montenegro, and we are grateful for it. We obviously don't agree on the current events, and we are very much clear about our position. From the very day one, we have proven and showed a very clear support to Ukraine in terms of the clear choice of the Ukrainian people to join the EU, to have a European perspective, both bilaterally as well as multilaterally, and obviously we are also part of the NATO system, where we have made the joint plans when it comes to defense strategy. And that's it. I think that Russia indeed has been trying to play a role in the region, but when you have a clear principle, and when you have a clear value to defend, which is a value of free choice, democracy, and EU perspective, then I think we are on a safe side.
Well, I guess the Kremlin tried to use the question of Serbia and Montenegro against you, and maybe they're trying it still on various levels. But there must be some sort of problem, because you promised, not you, the government promised to have a census in Montenegro after more than 10 years, I think, another census. And it was not done. It was delayed until this last December, because of the reason some journalists say that it would have shown that there are more mother speakers, Serbian mother speakers, than officially is accepted in Montenegro, and that would have political consequences. Then it would be asked for Serbian use in schools and things like that. And actually it was done now, the census, after 4 delays. And the first results are out. But those results which show who is a Serb speaker and who is a Montenegrin speaker, they have been delayed another 6 months. Why? Why is this the case? Is there still some sort of fear that it could stir political emotions?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that this is somebody already asked me the question, a very similar one, and I answered it. I don't really think that Austria is less of a country or a nation because of the fact that the official language is German. Neither I think that United States is less of a nation because the official language is English. Or you see the point, right? I think that to be very, very frank with you, I think that in the Balkans we have made a mess with the name of the language. It is linguistically one language, which we all speak in Montenegro, in Serbia, in Croatia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, we have started sort of building our countries in the way that perhaps they have been built back in the 19th century. I don't think that's something which should be the case. Neither, to be very frank with you, I think it's a rational thing to do. I recently went to Germany on an official visit, and it's a story that I was told by the president of Germany, where when he was foreign minister, he, I think, hosted the foreign ministers of the countries of the Western Balkans, and they they basically tried to perhaps have an efficient way of translating with one translator. And then I think that the countries sort of asked to have different translators, which was something that Germany obviously did. However, at the dinner, during the dinner, they all ended up speaking without a translator. And then it's really a very strange notion, because why do we have language? We have language as a humankind. We have invented language as a means to communicate. And if you really go back to the core reason why we have invented the language, then it's really difficult to understand, the whole mess that we have created in the Western Balkans on the name of the language. And perhaps this is not even, diplomatically, fully correct, to say, but it is really the fact. In Montenegro, constitutionally, we have Montenegrin as an official language. On top of it, we have Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian as the languages in the official use. And that's what our constitution says. And this is, as somebody who obviously obeys to the constitution. That's something that that I also have in mind when I speak about it. But linguistically, I think that I have explained what is behind it.
I'm sorry that I have asked this question, because actually we are responsible, we Austrians, for this. In the Habsburg monarchy, language philosophy was invented, and those people said language has always a communicational side and an emotional side. And I'm afraid in the Balkans, the emotional side has been very strong for quite some time, and the communication side was not so much in front, as we have seen at the end, after the end of Yugoslavia.
Unfortunately, but I think going back to your question on the census last time has been done in 2011, and we do it, as it is the case in many countries, every 10 years. So we were supposed to do it in 2021. However, because of the COVID, the census was delayed. The census is a very statistical thing, which basically should help decision makers, to really understand demographics, understand ultimately how many people currently live in Montenegro. And we came to a very very boring conclusion that the last time Montenegro had 630,000 people in 2011. This time it is again the same, about 630,000. However, the structure has completely changed, and many of the new people who live in Montenegro came from Ukraine, came from Turkey, came from Russia. Many Montenegrins, regardless whether they speak Montenegrin or Serbian, they left Montenegro. Not because probably of the name of the language, but because of injustice, weak economic opportunities in the country, inequality of opportunities. And I truly think that whenever you see a politician in Montenegro really trying to irrationally put the emphasis on the things that are ultimately, sort of individual questions, then you come to a conclusion that that politician is very weak in offering the things that really matter for people, including economic development, rule of law, green economy transition, and everything else.
I have to say Montenegro is the only country where we know that there is a growth of population as far as the new census says.
By
a
about
small one,
3%, yeah.
but there is some. It's different from some member countries in the European Union.
Yeah.
Not to mention names. But we should actually accept also questions from the floor, and as you can see already quite a lot. Yes, in the second row there.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm really delighted and fascinated about your positive view regarding particularly EU accession. 10 years ago, I came as a German ambassador to your country, and during that time, I particularly enjoyed the natural beauty of your country. And maybe you know that I got involved in some ecological projects, nature protection in particular. And I know you have been mentioning ecological Montenegro as an ecological state. By the way, in Montenegro, I think it's the only state which has this in its constitution, in Article 1. So I would like to ask you what can be done to really implement Montenegro as an ecological state. I may mention very briefly that Prince Nikola Petrović Njegoš just published an article that he is going to support the ecological projects in your country with his foundations. He has been very much involved in this also for many years. So this is very important also for EU accession, because Chapter 27 of the EU acquis was opened, and now you have to implement it. Right. And that will be a real challenge. So what do you think needs to be done to implement this? Thank you.
Right. Yes,
Let us take maybe 3 questions in the second row, then the second row also here. Yeah.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. I have 2 questions, and I wanted to ask you from 2 different perspectives. Montenegro as a candidate member state, and then looking forward to Montenegro being an EU member. So the first question about EU enlargement is, how many member states is too many? From the perspective of a candidate, also looking forward to your being a member. And also, how would you feel in those 2 situations about the one member state veto for important issues? Thank you very much.
I take 1/3. Yes, in the third row. Yes, here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to the people of Montenegro to have such a cosmopolitan, quality economist as a president.
Oh, well, you know.
As you are a globalist in terms of education and formation, I heard you also had been to China, right?
What?
You had been to China also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how do you gauge the economic influence of China in your country compared to the EU's economic influence? Thank you.
Mr. President.
So the former ambassador of Germany, has been recognized in Montenegro as a lady who protected one very important salina in Montenegro from ourselves, and thank you for that. I think this has been very much appreciated, especially in a time where the nature has been attacked by by a development which was entangled with probably some dirty capital and organized crime. And I think it was indeed recognized, and I think we now have a salina which is protected, although we have not still been able to really fully put it back to its old glory. It is one of probably the most interesting places in Montenegro, a place where most of the birds stop on their migratory routes from Europe to Africa, and I think as such it should be protected. on a wider issue, when it comes to the green economy transition, I think that, a tremendous, support and a tremendous part in that regard has been done by Montenegro joining the energy community, actually based in Vienna, which is supporting Montenegro as well as the other countries of the Western Balkans to align its legislation with the one of the EU, but more importantly to really support the implementation of the energy as well as climate-related issues in terms of really being implemented well. Montenegro, as many other countries of the Western Balkans, has a big chunk of its electricity produced by thermal power plants. We have one, very important, in the country, which currently produces about 40% of our electricity consumption. And it is a crucial part of balancing our system. We have been good in over the last few years in creating new production facilities from the renewables. We have also now in the process of adopting a new, more friendly law, which has to do with the renewable production. Montenegro is a country with a huge comparative advantage when it comes to the renewables, both the wind as well as the sun. And that's the way to go. And I think that's something that has been acknowledged by the political establishment in general. I think the other way is obviously to implement the standards when it comes to the pollution. There are things that the government is now doing that the former governments have been doing. I think that the biggest issue is really the one which is related to the management of the waste and water waste. And if you really analyze, and this is now my knowledge from the EBRD speaking, waste and water waste management is still something which where we tremendously lag behind the EU member states. And I think this is now being part of discussion with the EU. As you rightly said, the chapter 27 is probably technically the most challenging chapter. So the ecology and everything which has to do with water and wastewater and waste management. And I think that we would obviously, require more adequate funds in order to cover some of the needs, so that we basically, are up to certain standards that are required in the EU. I believe that we are also going to be asking for a certain transitional period in that issue, but my impression is that really it is again becoming sort of quite topical and perhaps even a common denominator of the political establishment. Climate issues and in general green economy transition, with probably the biggest sort of uncertainty on the exact plan on phasing out the fossil fuels. So we are fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. We are fully aligned with everything which is being internationally adopted in that regard. But still, I think that there is nationally things that we need to implement a bit better. On China. China has been quite involved in Montenegro, particularly during the period of 2015 to 2020, so a few years before the change of the government. So at one point, China was financing the key road in the country through the loan that Montenegro took from the Chinese Exim Bank, as well as Chinese companies were constructing the same road. So Montenegro at one point was very much exposed to the Chinese influence. I think that following the completion of of this particular section of the highway, which is basically connecting Montenegro with Serbia and with the rest of Central Europe, the exposure of Montenegro on China has diminished. Nevertheless, what I think is important is not who is implementing the construction projects in the country, but it is about the transparency of the procedures that the government put in place ahead of implementation of the infrastructure projects. Ultimately, it matters, the way that the project is planned, and that the transparency behind the project. I'm in favor of that approach, which then obviously whoever comes with the best offer within the international standards that now obviously need also to take into the account certain security aspects, as we are a NATO member. I think that's then up to the open market competition. We have a traditionally good political relationship with China, and I think we are gonna keep them as such. Naturally, closely following what is a common statement and position within the NATO alliance, as well as obviously the EU position. As you know, Montenegro has been closely following the foreign security policy of the EU for the last 10 years. So whatever the EU adopts at the level of the Council, we immediately put it into the action. And that has been the case, that is the case, and that will remain the case as long as before we enter the EU, when we are together with the other member states gonna jointly obviously decide on the foreign policy. And
that was the first question. How much is too much?
Well, I think ultimately, as I said, the EU accession has two aspects. It has the aspect of a technical process, which is based on meritocracy and reforms, which is a prerequisite of everything else. So this is going back to the story of the layers that I have spoken about, the fundamentals. We cannot, the EU, in my understanding, is the club of the countries that share the same values. And ultimately, that's the story of the values. And currently there are 10 candidate countries. I think that we are all in different stages of accession, but I think that my understanding is, as long as the countries deliver, for all the 10 countries, ultimately the door of the accession is open. And I'm very much hopeful that Montenegro will be the first one to open the door.
Can we have a short last round, if that's okay? I have over there, a lady over there. Yes, you. Just a second.
Dobar dan. My family is also from Montenegro and mainly live in Budva. And I have a few questions, mainly because you mentioned a few times that you started to fight the corruption over there, and knowingly the people there, they have lost actually the belief to trust in politics because all the corruption that existed before. And what will you do to change the perspective of the people, of the Montenegrins? Plus, my family is from Budva, and there's still a thing going on there that the mayor of Budva is still in jail, knowingly actively working. So what are the steps you do to end this corruption so people gain trust in the government again?
Yeah.
Should we take the last two questions. You can think about the answer.
Yeah.
Maybe over there in the middle, because I didn't. Yeah.
Thank you for your excellent story about the enlargement in Montenegro. I have a question concerning, well, EU enlargement. As you probably know, the EU wants to always tie a couple of different candidate members together in order to join at the same time. What other candidate member state do you see that is at a similar level of preparedness for EU accession? Thank you.
Maybe we have to stop here. I know that it's late. Maybe these were the last two questions.
Yeah, perhaps the gentleman was very consistent
Okay, if you
from the
take
beginning.
if you take one more, yes, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. One short question. So, a democratic front is now a part of government, and has been it an obstacle to so far to your policy of the staying credible NATO member, and sorry, I am a little nervous. So okay, short question. Have the Democratic Front still committed to the program of government promoting EU accession and staying credible NATO member? Thank you very much.
I understood. So I think that the toughest question, to be very frank with all of you, was the one who was raised by the lady. First of all, I think it's very problematic to still have a city, one of the 25, where the mayor of it, is in jail. So, not still, fully processed, but I think that it is the process is naturally problematic. So, I think that the best solution there would have been for him to resign from the position where he was elected by the people, by the way. But answering your question more sort of more widely, I have my campaign pitch was very simple, and I'm gonna be doing politics in Montenegro predominantly based on that very simple sentence, where I believe that I have entered the country's politics with the aim, to do my best, and perhaps, I'm not gonna succeed in it, but at least I'm gonna, do my best to try to create Montenegro a society where, in order to succeed in life, you basically need two things. That's hard work and education. That wasn't the case so far. I think that I haven't, it's a process. We haven't still come to that place. But when you know where to go, then you need to keep going until you reach that destination. And being persistent and being vocal about it is important. I think that that's the only way I can sort of answer the question, because what I have seen also is the power changes people. I have seen within even my short political life that people who have perhaps entered politics with a good narrative have changed. This is why I think it is very important to enter politics relatively when you are financially stable because it decreases the likelihood of one becoming corrupted or serving interests that are not, you know, within the public interest. But I think that I wouldn't be as pessimistic as you were. I think that generally people have changed their attitude towards the institutions and the politicians in Montenegro. For once, we have politicians that are accountable to the people. And that's the crucial difference, because even from a very selfish point of view, I think that accountability comes with the fear. And this is why, going back to the beginning of my speech, when I mentioned why the change of the government in 2020 was crucial for everything else, because, you know, before politicians in the country were not afraid to lose elections because they never lost them. And when you didn't have experience of losing elections, then you really don't have this attitude of being accountable to somebody or being afraid of your current actions. I think that the biggest change was that we now have fear. That has within politicians being afraid of losing elections, which, you know, makes them, I guess, more, how to say, guided towards serving the public interest, you know, which is not still ideal, but I think it's a big change. On the story of and I think, you know, the whole EU accession obviously thing has to do about what I just said. You know, making a society which has in place an incentive system, you know, which is delivering on the sentence that I have just said, where for success in life you need two things: education and hard work. Which, you know, when you ask the people in the Balkans what is needed to succeed in life, I remember, according to a survey that I have done when I was at EBRD, 40% were answering political connections. 40%. In comparison to, I think that our benchmark country was Germany, 3% of Germans answered political connections, while most of the Germans, you know, replied hard work and education. In contrast, most of the people in the Balkans were answering political connections, is predominantly the key factor to succeed in life. And, you know, I'm there to do my best in order to, you know, to make the things back to the normal. Really, I'm just speaking about normality here. It's not nothing particularly special. On the participation within the government, you know, it's ultimately the question for the Prime Minister. What I, you know, have spoken about very clearly during the process of the formation of the government, you know, I said that it is important to get the government, which has a very strong support from the Parliament, so that over the last 3 months, we indeed deliver on the appointments within the judiciary, where, as I said at the beginning, there was a requirement of the qualified majority, so supermajority in the Parliament. And now we know that I was right. That, indeed, because now we have the deliveries in the Parliament, which came you know, as a result also of the way that the government was formed. So indeed now, due to that, we have unblocked EU accession, and now we are in the position for the government to deliver even more, so that we speed up the process. And on the question on I'm sorry, what was the question?
It was about relationship with the enlargement issues of other Western Balkan countries, how you relate to them.
As I said before, I think that the biggest thing that that Europe can do for the wider Western Balkans is to support the EU accession of Montenegro. I think that's the by far the most effective thing to do if you want to promote the stability and prosperity in the rest of the region, because the positive story, as I previously said, of Montenegro being in the EU as a result of the reforms and the change of the political culture and fundamentals that we currently have, it would be a tremendous signal to the rest of the region as well as to Eastern Europe. And that's the story that I want to tell, and that's the story that I think is increasingly being understood by our partners in the EU.
Mr. President, I think this was a perfect ending of our discussion. This optimism is inspiring. I think we need it also here. But you're a realist, because I read in one of your articles, you said we can become Switzerland or Singapore.
Oh no, that's the Prime Minister.
That was the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I'm usually...
It says here Milatović. You see, Milatović.
Yeah, that's
maybe it's wrong.
Yeah.
But before that, we must reach the level of Slovenia.
Yeah,
that was him, not you.
No, this is what I said. So the Prime Minister said, we should become Singapore, and I said, let's first become Slovenia. Not obviously to undermine Slovenia's development, but to me, I think that the role model is Slovenia. It's a country that shares the history, shares the structure, even the resources. And it's a pity that Montenegro hasn't used its human capital and resources as optimally as Slovenia has done over the past 1 century. And I think, this now should change.
Mr. President, we wish you and your country all the best from all of us. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.